Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Kuf Vav of Bava Kamma. Let me share my screen and we will really get started. So hold on, find the screen that I'm sharing, and here we go. So, as we mentioned at the end of the discussion of yesterday's daf, today we begin with a statement by Rav Sheshes, and so let's just dive right in. It's although it's still discussing the issues of people who swear falsely, or in connection with some kind of debt. This is sort of adjacent to that, and so let's take a look and see what he says. We are 11 lines up from the bottom of Kuf Hayam and Bet. It's the second word on the line, Amar of Sheshes. So Amar of Sheshes, Hakofer b'vikadon, if you deny owing some kind of thing that has been put with you to watch, we'll call it a deposit, Nasa alav gazlan, you immediately become a robber, meaning that v'chayav ba'onesin, you're obligated for anything bad that were to happen. So let's just go over the example. So if I give you something to watch and I do not pay you because you are a nice person and you're watching it for me for free, well, then not only are you not obligated to pay me the object if something beyond your control were to happen, but even if the item gets stolen from your house, or that also would be something that I wouldn't get paid for. But now, all of a sudden, because you have denied it, and so as a result, you're treated like a robber. So Rav Sheshes says that you are become liable for anything that happens, even something that's unavoidable. You will be liable and have to pay me back the original amount. Vitana tuna, and maybe we can say that in fact, we've got a brisa that supports this, and this was a brisa that we had cited yesterday, I believe. The you denied it. Lamanu onesh, and so we see that's the punishment. That meaning that verse tells you that you have to return the item. So that's that's an aspect of the punishment. As Haramin and Rashi says, the first of the widest lines in Rashi, the middle of the line, lamadnu laonish, diksiv basrei beheshiv es hagzela. So, and immediately says thereafter, you need to return the stolen object. Alma Kamma le birshusei. This shows that the object has been put into the possession of the thief, because otherwise there wouldn't be a need to return it, because it would always have belonged to the victim. So mishas v'chikesh. So this shows that as it gets put into the thief's, the watcher's possession, as soon as he denies ad avid hashava, until he's done the returning. Vizehu onsha, and that is the punishment. So that's the punishment. And azhara minayin, we have a principle in Torah that anytime somebody is going to be punished for something as a result of one Torah verse, there will also be another verse that provides a warning. So where is that warning? So Talmud Lomar lo techachashu, you shall not deny falsely. So my lav la onish kfira. So this all teaching us about the punishment. Isn't this all teaching, this brisa all teaching us about the punishment for denial? And so as a result, it all is supporting Rav Sheshes. Lo onishvua. No, you don't have to say that. In fact, what Rav Sheshes says, it could be that when does it get put into your rishus if you deny it? Only if you have sworn about it, and that's what these two pieces of these two lines in this brisa are talking about, where you denied it and swore about it, and the azhara is also talking about where you denied it and swore about it. So now the Gemara says, 1 second, Hamadigatani Seifa Ishtaba. So Miklal Deresha Delo Ishtaba. So 1 second, but if that brisa continues to talk about and the next part explicitly saying that it's talking about where an oath was made. The Katani say, and so therefore, doesn't that imply that the first part of the brisa is talking about where an oath was not made? Because the Katani Seifa, listen to what the Seifa, the end of that brisa says. The Nishba al Sheker. What about the words to swear falsely? So what about that? So Lamanu Onish, that tells us the punishment, because there that pasuk is talking about having to repay the fifth and bringing an asham offering. So Azhara Minayan, how do I know that there's a warning for it? Because the Talmud Lomar Delos Shakaru, you shouldn't lie. So doesn't that show that, given that fact that the second part of that brisa is talking about an oath explicitly, doesn't it show that the first part of that brisa must be talking about without an oath? No, not necessarily. Amri, edi de ishtaba. We can say that both of them are talking about an oath. So kan shahoda and kan shabo edim, and that the first part of the the latter part of the brisa is talking about where you confess, and that's why you're obligated to pay back the item, pay a fifth, and bring an asham. And kan shabo edim, and the first part is talking about where there were just witnesses. Also edim chayba onesin. If the witnesses come, you'll be liable for anything that happens to the item, and you'll be liable to pay it back. Oduye odi chayba karen b'chomish v'asham. But if you actually confess, then you're liable to the original principal, the 1/5 surcharge, and the asham offering. Okay, so we have not, in fact, supported Rav Sheshes, and now we attempt to refute Rav Sheshes, and we're going to try a few times to refute Rav Sheshes. So let's see, we got Rami Bar Kamma, then we've got another one. I think it's those two are the main two. So we're going to try twice to challenge Rav Sheshes. So let's go from there. So we're going to start with a challenge of Rav Sheshes. Masiv Rami Bar Kamma. So Rav Rami Bar Kamma challenges Rav Sheshes because of the following Mishnah. This is a Mishnah that we have in Shavuos, Daf Mem Dalin Bet. So Vishikenegdo Chashud Al Shavuot. What happens if somebody is already known to be suspect with respect to making false oaths? Well, then that person, the person who is facing them in litigation, has the ability to swear and collect, because we're not going to let somebody who's suspect swear and avoid payment. As you may recall, we've seen that generally oaths are made by the person who is potentially liable for something, such as the oath of somebody who denies having taken possession of something to watch of yours. So that person swears and avoids payment. But if that person is suspect with respect to oaths, well, then the plaintiff in that situation, you would be able to go to that person and say, I left you something, I'm going to swear and collect. So, Ketzad, what are situations where somebody will be a suspect of making bad oaths, and therefore we will go to the other litigant? If you swore falsely with respect to testimony, or you swore falsely with respect to a deposit, or even just a regular plain oath that you make and you fail to fulfill it. Now, 1 second, if you were going to tell you that Rav Sheshes is correct, why do you need to have the case of Ashvuas Pikadon listed here? Bikfirahu de ipsil, just by denying that you owe the money, that you ever received the deposit, you will immediately become a thief. You will immediately become a robber, rather, and as a result of being a gazlan, you will now be prohibited to swear. So why do you need to reference a shuas habikadon, an oath for denying? Just the denial itself makes you disqualified from making an oath, according to Rav Sheshes. So doesn't that mean that Rav Sheshes is wrong? So not necessarily. Amrei hacha b'mayaskin. Here's what we're talking about in the case of that Mishnah. Dekaiba agam. It's where the animal was not that was being watched was not right in front of you. It was over by the swamp. Delav kavirahu. And so as a result, merely denying in that case is not does not constitute theft, because the subar the subar eshtamesna lay ada azlina umaisina lay, that I'm going to delay it. I'm going to get around him in order so that I can go and bring the animal, because I don't have it here. I don't want him to think that I'm not a responsible watcher, even though I'm not watching the item at the moment. I will go and get it from the swamp because I know that the swamp is a safe place, and so I'm going to go get it and bring it here. So that's what we're talking about in that Mishnah. That's why just the denial would not have been enough. But in the situation where Rav Sheshes is talking about, Rav Sheshes would say that when it's talking about a situation where the object is right there in your possession and you deny it. When you deny something that somebody gave you something and it's right there in your possession, then there's no excuse. That's a real denial, and you'll become a thief right away. And as a result, in that situation, you would be then subject to the rule of not being allowed to make an oath because you'd be a gazlan. And so as a result, that's not the situation that we're happen to be talking about in that Mishnah. So Teda, and you know that this is true because the Amar Rav Idi Bar Avin, listen to what Rav Idi Bar Avin said, Hakofer b'milva kasher la'edus. If you are given money and you deny it, you are still kosher to give testimony, meaning you are still allowed to swear. Why? Because money is something that is given. Well, let's take a look. Rashi will help us out. Oh yes, let's take a look at the last Rashi on the daf, Kuf Hey Amabet, and Rashi helps us out to understand why. Right? The Amar Rav Idi Hakover b'malva v'lo nishba. We're not talking about somebody who swore falsely about not having the loan. Ubo edim kash. And so even if the witnesses now come and say, actually, you were lying, we are witnesses that you actually did receive the money, kasher le'edus, he remains able to testify. Demilva lahotza nitna. A loan is meant for you to spend the money. If I lend you $1,000, I don't expect to come to your house and find the $1,000 in $20 bills sitting in your living room. I expect that I gave you the money in order to buy food, in order to do stuff with it, in order to do business, whatever it is. I gave you the money in order for you to spend it. And so therefore, it's not going to be in your possession. And therefore, you might deny in order to just buy yourself a little bit of extra time, but you would never swear, and you're not really trying to steal. And so, right, to milva lahotza nitna. So again, a loan is given in order to spend. Ve'ena akshav biyado, and so it's not right now in his hands. V'rotza lidchoso, and he's just trying to push him up until he has the money available to him. So that's why Rav Idi Bar Avin, consistent with our explanation of the Mishnah that Rami Bar Kamma brought, is saying that when you don't have it in front of you, then that is not a denial that causes you to be no longer able to testify. But if we're talking about something that's right there in front of you that you were there to watch, and so Rashi says, Umukminan, top line of Kavavam and Aleph, and we say that this is talking about Mukminan law, Beresh Shnayim Osim, at the beginning of Shnayim Osim, the beginning of Masechus Bava Metzia. Could go into Amri Sahade. We're talking about where witnesses come and say Dahishaisa. At that moment, the kafar light that the person denied Nakabiyade. It was in his hand. It was in his possession, and therefore Umasil Avalgab Delo Ishtaba. He's going to have to. He's no longer going to be a kosher witness, because even if he didn't swear, the Ibi Ishtaba, because of course, if we're talking about swearing, Mali Milva, Mali Pikadon. If you swear falsely, it doesn't matter what you're swearing about. That's going to cause you to be ineligible to be a witness. Okay, so now that we've dealt with that situation, we're going to have a second challenge of Rav Sheshes. V'hamar Ilfa, 1 second. we have this statement of Ilfa, because he says, Shvua Kona, an oath causes you to make the acquisition. Shvua hi dekanya aval kfira lo kanya. Doesn't that imply that an oath and only an oath makes you acquire the stolen object, or the object that was deposited with you and now becomes a stolen object? About kfira lo kanya, but denial alone is not sufficient. So hakinami dekaima ba'agam. Nah, we can say that situation also over there is talking about where it's not in the person's possession; it's over in the swamp. Or we can say, we can give a second answer. Here's a second answer. We're on A2 on the screen. My shvua kona. What does he mean by shvua kona? He means a new statement that we're going to be spending a little bit of more time on as we transition out of Rav Shesh's statement. Kida Rav Huna. He's saying something like Rav Huna. Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav. Listen to this remarkable statement that Rav Huna says in the name of Rav. Mana libiyadcha. I come to you and I say, I gave you $100 to watch, not to spend. It wasn't a loan. Bahala Omer, ein lecha biyadi. And you come back to me and say, I don't have anything of yours. Nishba. And you swear. Ba'agakach bo edim. And now witnesses come. Putter. You don't have to pay me back anything. Wow. Shenemar v'lakach be'alav v'lo yishalem. That the owner shall accept. This is talking about the owner accepting. The pasuk says, "Shvuas Hashem tiyeh ben shneihem." There'll be an oath between the two of them. Im lo shalach biyado b'malachas re'ehu. That he didn't take, he didn't send his hand to the object that belonged to the work object that belonged to his friend. V'lakach ba'alav, and the owner will thereby accept that oath, v'lo yishalem, and the person who was watching will not pay. So, kevan shekiblu habalim shvua shuv ein mishalem mamon. Once as Rav understands this pasuk, once the defendant, the watcher, makes the oath, and the owner gets the oath, then there is no further responsibility to pay. Now, that would be a remarkable statement that would seem to have contradicted numerous things that we've learned already. And we're going to bring up a number of them as we go forward. So don't let the illogic of it and the remarkable nature of this statement, that when you swear falsely that I gave you something and you no longer owe me it, don't say that is actually a full and aspect of the conversation, because Gufa. We're going to take a look at that statement now in more detail.
It seems that there's something. Sorry, it seems that something is missing. There's a bit that we're discussing whether the shavua can make someone or not. That can make someone cause us to consider the person as a gazlan, for example. But
correct.
But don't we have to establish first that this person is indeed a watcher and he was given how do we know that he wasn't given a gift? Where there has to be an establishment that we have to prove first that he was actually watching the object for someone else.
You're absolutely right. And we are assuming at the moment that either witnesses come or the person then later admits that they swore falsely. So those are the two situations. But we are definitely, when we say that somebody swears falsely, we are definitely talking about a situation where either witnesses come or the person admits. We have to be careful because there are very important differences between those two situations, and we're going to be dealing with them very shortly. But you're absolutely right that we certainly do have to have that as a piece of this puzzle. But okay, so let's take a look, and we'll keep that in mind as we go forward. So we'll remember your question and as we go through this. So we're going to repeat essentially Rav Huna's statement in the name of Rav. Kufa Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav. Mana li biyadcha. I've got $100 of mine. You're watching. V'hala Omer, and the other one says, Ein lecha biyadi klum. I don't have anything of yours. And of course, again, remember, that would tell us, according to Rav Sheshis, the person immediately became a thief. V'nishba ubo edim, And now he swears, and again, witnesses come. This is exactly Ken's point. We're talking about witnesses coming. Patur, he is exempt. The owner of the object will accept the oath, and the person who is watching the item will not have to. The alleged person who is watching the item will not have to pay. And the implication is, even if witnesses come to testify that the guy was lying when he swore. But balim a shvua, once the owners accept the oath, shuv ein mishal. The watcher no longer has to pay, even if it turns out that he was swearing falsely because of that pasuk. Amar Rava mistabra milse de Rav lebamilva. Now it makes sense to say what Rav says with respect to a loan, because that is given to be spent, and so as a result, the person doesn't have it any longer, and effectively, the oath allows the person to retain something that he doesn't even have anymore. But aval b'pikadon, how can Rav actually say this? It's remarkable that Rav says this with respect to something that I gave the watcher to watch, because because it should remain always in the possession of the owner. Meaning it should be. How could it's remarkable. But by God, this is what he says. Amar Rav afilu b'pikadon. But yet Rav still says it even in the case of an object being watched. And the reason that he says it is because because that's where the Torah says this rule. The context of Vilakach ba'alav below Yishalem is talking about an object put for watching, a deposit. So now we've clarified that the breadth of Rav's statement, it even applies with a pikadon. So Yosef, Rav Nachman, Amar lahashmaita. So Rav Nachman was teaching this rule, and Isvei Rav Acha bar Manyumi Rav Nachman. So Rav Acha bar Manyumi begins to ask about it. So we're now going to see that those questions. So we're I'm going to scroll up, and here we go. And now we're going to have Rav Acha's question. So what does Rav Acha ask? If we have a Mishnah, this is a Mishnah that we'll learn over this weekend. Where is my pikadon? So Amar lo avad, it was lost. Mashpiacha ani, I'm making you swear. Amar amen, and the guy says, yes, I will swear. And that amen is considered that he is swearing. And then it turns out that witnesses come and say that he ate the item, that it's no longer in existence because he took it and used it completely. Mishalam is a Karen. The person has to pay the value of the item, the 100%. So Hodama Atzmo, and if he admits it on his own, Mishalam Karen B'chomish V'asham, he has to pay the principal 1/5, and he has to bring in Asham. So how can you possibly say, Rav, that when you make the oath, you are no longer obligated to pay the item? We have a clear Mishnah that makes it clear that when you make an oath, and now witnesses come and say that you stole it, you have to pay the principal. So Amarle Rav Nachman says, no, you have to understand that Mishnah is talking about where the witness swore outside the context of court. The situation of Rav's statement is only in the context of court. And so that's why that Mishnah says you have to pay the principal back. So Amarle, Ihachi Ema Seifa, 1 second. You want to tell me that Mishnah is talking about where the watcher swore outside of Beis Din, but listen to the rest of that Mishnah, because Heiki Piktune, if the person says, "Where's my deposit?" and he says, "Amarlo Nignab," he says it was stolen. Mashpiacha ani, so I'm making you swear. V'amar amen, and he says, "Yeah, I'm swearing." And now he's testifying that he stole it. Mishalem Tashlumi Kavil. The guy's got to pay double. So, and very important, the only time you pay double for stealing is if you swore in Beis Din. So this cannot be an oath made outside of Beis Din. So, and Hoda Ma'atzmo, if he admitted on his own, Mishalem Karen V'chomesh V'asham, he would have to pay the principal, the 1/5, and the asham. And of course, he doesn't pay the double because the double is considered a penalty, and the penalty is something that you are not subject to if you admit your liability. And here he's admitting that he had lied. And now, as we comment on this Mishnah, if you want to say that this is outside of the court, would there be any kind of double payment? Of course not. There wouldn't be. So it's got to be. So Amar Le. So Rav Nachman says back, I could tell you that the beginning part of this Mishnah is outside of Beis Din, and the end part of this Mishnah is inside Beis Din. Now, I should pause for just a moment, because you may be thinking to yourself, well, I don't understand. What about the last part of this Mishnah? Why isn't that a challenge to Rav's statement? After all, you have somebody taking something and swearing, and the Mishnah is telling that you have to pay double, or you have that you have to pay double. So, or you have to pay the principal, the 1/5, and then asham offering if you admit it on your own. But the issue is that those cases are dealt with explicitly in the Torah. So Rav is clearly not talking about a situation where you say that the item was stolen from you. And so as a result, that's not the kind of denial that he is going to say, that kind of denial and oath that he is going to say is subject to the rule. It is only and other oaths with respect to other excuses that a watcher may have that will trigger the fact that he will not be liable for anything. So that's just a very brief aside. So Amar Le, I could tell you that the beginning of this Mishnah is talking about outside of Beis Din, and the end of the Mishnah is talking about inside of Beis Din. But I don't want to give you that kind of explanation, because there's no way, nothing in the wording of the Mishnah that seems to fit with that. And so it's a little bit of a forced answer. But what I can tell you is Idi v'Idi b'Beis Din, that actually we could say all of it is within Beis Din, below kasha, and yet you still don't have a difficulty, because yes, the first part of this Mishnah says that we have to pay back because kan b'kafatz, because in that first case, the person is jumping ahead and he's swearing without the court imposing the oath on him. But kan b'shelo kafatz, and in the second part of the Mishnah, we're dealing with a certain situation where the oath was made after the court insisted that the defendant make the oath. And so in that situation, that's why that's going to be different, because that's going to be subject to the Torah principles, and that's but the first one is not considered an oath in Beis Din because a person just jumped ahead and swore. Now, he may have made that oath within Beis Din, but he didn't make it in the context of Beis Din forcing him to swear. And so that's an important distinction, that that when we say that when Rav made his statement, he was only talking about a situation where the oath was made in Beis Din and it was made at the request of Beis Din. Only then would the Torah's line of v'lakach ba'alav, that the owner needs to accept the oath, v'lo yishalem, and the person who was watching the deposit doesn't pay, would apply. Now, Amrle, Rami Bar Chama le Rav Nachman. Rami Bar Chama says to Rav Nachman, Michti, let's take a look at this. It's really quite remarkable. De Rav, you, Rav Nachman, lo svirulach. You don't agree with Rav. So mashkune nafshach ad Rav lamalach. Why are you trying so hard to defend Rav's ruling? So Amar Le, Rav Nachman explained, Lefarusha de Rav, because I think it's important to be able to explain Rav. De Rav ahachim mitaritz lelamas nisan, that we have to be able to explain how he answers up this Mishnah. So Vaha Rav Kra Kamar. Well, 1 second, how can Rav Nachman disagree with Rav Rav has a pasuk. He cited a pasuk. So Amrei, they explained that in fact we have a different lesson from that pasuk. Hurrah, l'chol nishban shebetorah nishban v'lo mishalmin hu da'asa. That this pasuk of belakach ba'alav v'lo yishalem tells us that when you have an oath in the Torah, the oath of the Torah is that a person swears and does not pay because the owner accepts it and the defendant does not pay. That's what the pasuk tells. Misha alav l'shalem hu nishba. The one who would ordinarily have been the one that we would say would have to pay, that's the one who swears in order to avoid having to pay. Okay, so now that we've challenged that, Rav Hamnuna offers a challenge to Rav's statement. And so, Hishpia alav chamisha pamim. If we make the defendant swear 5 times, Bain bifnei Beis Bain shelo bifnei Beis Din, doesn't make a difference whether it's inside court or outside court, the kafar alav, and he denies it every single time. And now, chayav al kol achas v'achas, he is going to be liable for the 1/5 penalty, and which is really a surcharge because even admitting it will not get you out of it. This 1/5 surcharge, and he's going to be subject to an asham offering for each and every time he swore falsely. So Amar Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Shimon says, "My tam, what's the reason? Because after all, maybe you should only be subject to it once. Because the defendant could have admitted that he in fact owed the money. Each time he denies, it makes a difference because that would change his liability situation. Now you can't tell me that he jumped up here. Hishpia alav katani, because the Mishnah says specifically that the plaintiff had the defendant swear, and so as a result, if the plaintiff didn't get this, the defendant didn't swear on his own, there was somebody who forced the defendant to swear. So, and chutz lebeis din lo matzis amrat, and you can't say that this is all talking about outside of court because we specifically say bain bifnei beis din, bain shelo bifnei beis din. So bifnei beis din titani, we said it was specifically in court. So who mosivla, who befarikla. So Rav Hamnuna, presented the challenge, but he also resolved it because let's dud in Katani. We can say that there are 2 different sides to the case. Ishpia alav chutz lebeis din. We can say that he was forced to swear outside of Beis Din, meaning that the Beis Din imposed the oath, but he specifically took it outside the court context. So he never actually made the oath in the Beis Din. Beis Din kafatz. And in the Beis Din, what happened? He got up and volunteered and did it on his own without him being forced. And so that's why that situation is different. And now we come back to the underlying statement of Rav and say, you know what? There's actually a remarkable narrowing that we could do. Because Masiv Rava asked, now it's not completely clear whether this is a challenge to Rav or a challenge to Rav Hamnuna. But we'll read it as a challenge to Rav Hamnuna because Rav Hamnuna had brought this case of swearing 5 times. Now, what's the situation in that case? So Bala Bayis should ta'utainis gana bifikadon. If you have somebody who, a person who's an unpaid watcher who says that an item was stolen from him, the nishba, and he swears, v'hoda, and he admits, uvo edim, and witnesses also come. So now we're going to distinguish between which came first, the admission or the witnesses. Im ad shelo bo edim hoda, if he admitted before the witnesses came, mishalem karen b'chomish v'asham, he's going to have to pay the principal, the 1/5, and an asham. V'im mishabo edim hoda, but if he comes after witnesses, if he only admits his guilt after the witnesses come, mishalem tashlum mikefel v'asham, he's going to have to pay the double, and because he admitted, he's going to have to bring the asham offering. V'hacha chutz lebeis din v'kafetz lo matzis amros. Now you can't possibly say that any kind of oath here is outside of court. Now we know ahead of time the part of the answer to this challenge is that Rav does not actually apply his rule when you're talking about somebody who claims that that it was stolen, because that's explicit in the Torah, and we're going to see that in a moment. And because kefil katani, we know it can't be outside of court or where the guy jumped up and volunteered the oath, because he's subject to the double payment if in fact the witnesses came before he admitted it. So Ella Amarava Kol Hoda Lo Shna Toin Tinus Ava. That anytime you admit, there is no it doesn't make a difference whether you claim that it was lost. The Lo Shna Toin Tinus Ganab doesn't make a difference whether you said it was taken by a thief. Lo Amar Rav. Rav did not make his statement in that situation. Meaning, if there's an admission by the watcher that he actually stole the item, the watcher needs to pay back. Because the Torah specifically tells us that one who admits it needs to buy shalumi karen b'chomish. That one who admits it needs to pay the principal and the 1/5, and of course also bring an asham. Toan tain has gone up. Now, if in fact you claim that it was stolen, ubo edim namilo amarav. And in that situation, if you say that it was stolen and witnesses come, you also don't have the applicability of Rav's statement, because dahak siv tashlumi kefel, because that also the Torah specifically says that when somebody says that the item that they were watching was stolen, and then it turns out, and they swear to that effect, and it turns out that it was not stolen, that they took it themselves, they have to pay back double. So Ki Ka'amar, when did Rav make his statement that somebody who swears is exempt from payment? Kikon shetoin tainis avad v'nishba below hoda uvo edim. That when somebody says that it was that something was lost, it wasn't stolen. It was just lost, and I don't know what happened, but I'm not liable to you because it was lost. And he swears falsely, and he fails to admit it, and now witnesses come and testify. That is where the Torah will not require the watcher to pay, because of the language of the lakach be'alav v'lo yishalem. Okay, so now that we've qualified it in that way, so now we're going to reinterpret Rav Hamnuna's question, because now Rav Hamnuna's question is difficult. Because if in fact we say that the person that the reason, right, in that Mishnah, Rabbi Shimon said matam, what was the reason? Oh, will be yachol lachzor v'lahodos, because he could have retracted and admitted. But if he admitted, he would in fact owe the money based on the fact that admission is sufficient. And here he hasn't admitted. So why should he be subject to owing anything? He shouldn't be subject to owing anything at all. So Azal Rav Gamda ba'amra l'shmaita kamei de Rav Ashi. So Rav Gamda went and told over Rav's teaching in front of Rav Ashi. Amar lei hashta umma Rav Hamnuna talmidei de Rav. Well, 1 second, Rav Hamnuna was a student of Rav. The Yada de Amar Rav Hoda, and he would have known that that Rav admitted that if you confess, then you're going to be liable. The Komosiv Hoda, and because we see that but yet he challenged Rav from a Mishnah that talks about somebody who confesses. Va'at Amrat Hoda Lo Amar Rav, and so now you want to tell me that that Rav did not, that Rav actually says that if you confess, you're not, that you are liable. How could, if Rav says that confession creates liability, how could Rav Hamnuna use a Mishnah that involves confession to challenge Rav? Doesn't that show that Rav does not, in fact, agree that confession triggers liability if you've sworn, meaning that the application of v'lakach ba'alav v'lo yishalem would apply even if you admit? So no. Amar le Rav Achasava le Rav Ashi. Rav Achasava explains and says, you know what? No, you don't have to say that. Rav Hamnuna hachi kakashalai. This is what Rav Hamnuna was trying to ask. Amra bishlam nishba. As we turn to Kovavim Bet, if you tell me that nishba ki asu edim mechayev, everything makes sense if you swore falsely, and when witnesses come, he's going to be liable. Because that's why we're going to hold him liable to an asham offering, because it's subject to the false oath. Because each time he could have changed his mind and admitted, meaning if the money he denied could have been extracted from him based on the basis of witnesses, then it's logical to consider each oath significant, because he could have retracted and admitted. But but now that Rav, you're telling me that if witnesses come, you're going to be exempt. Mi ika midi de ilu asi sahade umishadi be pater. 1 second. Can there be such situation where witnesses come and testify and he's exempt? Va'ananeku nechayvu karban ashvua hoa b'yachol laxar v'lahodos. And we're going to say, look, yes, witnesses could have come and you'd be exempt. But because theoretically you could have retracted and you would have and admitted, and therefore you would have been liable, hashtamias lo odi. But that theoretical possibility isn't the truth. You haven't admitted. So no debt exists. So as a result, when you swear the multiple times, you are swearing on not owing anything. So how come in that situation you are going to be how come in that situation how could you possibly be liable for 5 times the 1/5 penalty when you wouldn't have been liable for anything? Because even if witnesses come to testify, we would have you be able to be exempt according to Rav. So that's Rav Hamnun.
How can he say that no debt exists? The debt may exist, but the fellow is swearing that he's swearing falsely. There's no debt. The debt may still exist.
So the remarkable statement of Rav is that if you swear falsely and say that no debt exists, then you're not going to be liable any longer. So you're right, the debt does exist, but you're not going to be liable in that situation where you deny deny having received it, and you don't use the excuse that it was stolen. If you just deny it and you swear, the Rav's remarkable statement, again, that's why I said it was so remarkable. That's you would not be liable for that payment.
But even if even Adim come and the Adim say that this person has a debt, they Rav wouldn't be Machayev him.
That's exactly right, 100%. And remarkably, the Ein Mishpat has a marking there, so I'm not sure whether the halacha is like this, but that's what it seems like. The point is that, but it's a very narrow case, because remember, if the thief admits it, then he will pay. But in the situation, I gave you $100 to watch, Ken. I then come to you and say, listen, Ken, can I get my $100? And you say, I don't know what you're talking about, David. You didn't give me anything. And I said, listen, you have to swear, and you swear. And then I say, oh, I got to go get witnesses. And then I bring witnesses. You owe me nothing. You owe me zilch, nada, nothing, until you admit. If you admit, then you'll have to pay back the stuff that you stole. But until you admit, because you swore, and because the Torah says the lakach ba'alav v'lo yishalem, according to Rav, we're going to say that you are not going to be liable in that narrow situation. So it's remarkable. It's counterintuitive. It's incredible. Hard for me to imagine that the halacha could be like that. But that is exactly what Rav's saying, and it's essentially, you have to understand it as a gzeirus hakasam. It's taking a pasuk literally to mean in that situation. Now, remember, if you admit it ever, you would be liable. And the other thing to remember is that if you, instead of saying that I don't know what you're talking about, you never gave me anything, you say, oh yeah, I remember you gave me that. Listen, you didn't pay me to watch it, and it was stolen from me, so I'm not liable to you. And it turns out that you actually had it all along. Then the Torah specifically says that you'll pay double in that situation. So as a result, the Rav does not apply his rule in that situation where you swore that it was stolen when in fact it wasn't. So that's a further caveat. But in the situation where you just deny and you say lo hayudvar molam, you didn't give me anything, I don't know what you're talking about, and you swear to that effect, and then I bring witnesses that say I actually did give you the stuff, then you are scot-free, home free, and have yourself an extra $100, which of course you stole. And so as a result, you should admit it and give it back to me. But if you don't admit it, then you are not liable. And one can actually, if you think about it, that's probably the best way to understand this, because if you have zero recollection of it, of my having given you the $100, and you actually believe that nothing ever happened, and you so believe it that you swear to it, maybe we should say that, in fact, even if I bring witnesses that say that I left you a deposit, that you don't know what I'm talking about, we shouldn't necessarily hold you liable. Obviously, if you admit it, then you'll have to pay back. But we're dealing with, remember, a situation where the person who the person who received the deposit, the watcher, never admits it ever. And so, from his perspective, he obviously could be a thief, a total thief, and a criminal, but he also could be a person who just has no idea what the guy's talking about. And and the witnesses, maybe the witnesses are mixed up, and you just happen to look like somebody else. So the point is that one can imagine a situation where there is a sense to this ruling of Rav. Okay. All right. So
you could also say, why would anyone ever admit to receiving a gift? They could say, listen, I can get away scot-free.
Yeah, well, but you remember, you have to swear, and you have to swear in God's name, and if you get caught, then even though you won't owe the item, you'll never be allowed to swear or give testimony in court again. So not so simple to just get away with it. If it's big enough, maybe you'll call it worth it. But most people, I think, want to be honest, and so hopefully that's what we're talking about. All right, but in any event, let's move on. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So now we're going to teach a new rule. So my apologies for not scrolling. We're going to teach another rule regarding a watcher who claims that the item being washed was stolen. And this is a rule that we saw a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to see it again now. So Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, if you left me a deposit and I say that it was stolen and I'm lying, and it turns out that I swore about it and it turns out that I'm caught, I have to pay double. This is the key part of this statement. If I slaughtered or sold it, if we're talking about a sheep or an ox, I'll have to pay 4 times or 5 times for the slaughtering or selling. And why? Right? A regular thief pays double. So too, if you claim theft, you're going to have to pay double. Just as a ganav pays double, and if he slaughters it or sells it, he pays 4 or 5 times if it's a sheep or an ox. So too, with respect to a person who claims theft, he will also have to pay 4 times or 5 times if he slaughtered it or sold it. So malaganav. So 1 second, I don't understand. When it comes to a ganav shekaim b'shalom tashlumi kefel shelo b'shvua, a thief pays the double without ever having had to have made a false oath. Tomer b'toin tanis ganav she'ein b'shalom tashlumi kefel ela b'shvua, but a toin tanis ganav only pays double when he makes an oath. So how can you say that there's some kind of kal v'chomer or that the same rule should apply? The rules aren't identical. The Toan Tanis Ganav has to make an oath in order for there to be any liability. So Amrei Hekeshahi, this is actually a hekesh. So you can't ask me based on logic. It's based on the connection of the 2 rules, the Ein Meshiv and Al Hekesha, and you can't ask me based on logic on a hekesh. So hanich lamanda amar chad beganav chad betoin tanis ganav shapir. When we had the analysis of the various psukim that we're talking about theft and claims of theft, we had one opinion that said that those verses, that the adjacent verses, one was talking about an actual theft and one was talking about a claim of theft. Elamanda Amar, Hi Im Yimatzei Haganav, the Im Lo Yimatzei, Tarbayu Betoin Tanis Ganav. But according to the one who said both of those psukim are actually talking about a situation where you claimed theft. So Ma'ikal Amemer, now there's no adjacency. So how do I know that there is some kind of connection between the two? So Amri Ganav Haganav, the fact that those psukim in that specifically the pasuk in Shmod Perakav Bet pasuk Zion that we had in last week's parsha, that reference to Haganav is and that it could have just said Ganav, but without the hey, without the. So the fact that it says Haganav, that teaches us that there's something extra that's included. And so it's not only a case of Toan Tinus Ganav, but also a actual case of theft as well that it would apply. So Esi Rabbi Chia bar Abba Rabbi Yochanan. 1 second. How can you possibly say that a somebody who claims theft will actually be subject to 4 times and 5 times penalty? I'm going to cite you a brisa that seems to suggest that you're only subject to the double penalty and not to 4 times and 5 times. Heichan Shori, if I asked you where my ox is, Nignav, and you tell me that it was stolen, Mashbiacha ani, and I say I'm making you swear, but Amar Amen, and you say yes, absolutely, I'm swearing. And now witnesses come and say, you ate my animal. You have to pay double. 1 second. But you are not allowed to eat meat without having slaughtered it. And yet you tell me that you're paying only double. Doesn't that show you only pay double and you don't pay 4 times or 5 times? Rabbi Yochanan says, no, you ate it when the animal died and you ate it. You ate it without slaughtering it. So as a result, that's why you are subject. That's why you're subject to the double payment, and you're not subject to the 4 times or 5 times payment. Well, 1 second. Why not say? Why did Rabbi Yochanan specifically answer that we're talking about eating it as a nevela, where it died without on its own? Why not have it be a treifa, have a good shchita, but it turns out that there was something wrong with the insides of the animal. Karevi Meir, the Amar shchita she'ena ru'uya shma shchita, because we have an opinion of Rebbe Meir who says that even a slaughtering that does not allow you to eat the animal is still considered a kosher slaughtering, and therefore would be subject to the 4 times and 5 times payment. So that's why Rabbi Yochanan didn't want to give that answer. Oh, Velishnale ben Pekua. Why not say that the animal never needed shechita in the first place? It was a ben Pekua. A ben Pekua is where the mother animal was slaughtered and out pops a living baby. And the living baby was inside the mother when the mother was slaughtered. And so as a result, that animal is not subject to even Eber min Achai, according to some opinions. And so as a result, it doesn't need to be slaughtered at all. It's already had its slaughtering because it was part of the mother. So again, Rabbi Meir, the Amar ben Pekua tan shchita. No, Rabbi Meir says that even that child would require slaughter, and so as a result, that's why Rabbi Yochanan didn't want to give that answer. The Lishnele Kagon Sha'ama Bedin Ba'amru Lo Tsei Ten Lo. Why not say that we're talking about a situation where the person was stood up in court and was subject to judgment and was told, go pay the guy, meaning the court case finished, and then the guy went and slaughtered the animal, because in that situation he's not liable for the 4 times or 5 times payment, even though he ate it. To Ha'amar Rava say Tainlo, because Rava says that if the court says go pay him, Tabach and then the thief slaughters or sold it, Patur. And what's the reason? My time up, Kevin de Paske, the mill say the Tabach because the first thing ended and now he slaughtered and sold it. Habi Gazlan. In doing so, now he's a Gazlan. He was a Ganav and he stole it with subterfuge. But now, because he's taken it after the court case, he's taken it in a more brazen manner. He's a robber. And a robber, a robber doesn't pay the 4 times or 5 times payment. If you go to somebody and essentially publicly take away their item, now you are a gazlan and you do not have to pay the 4 times or 5 times payment if you slaughter it or sell it, because you are not. The argument would be you're not enhancing your secrecy by engaging in that act to take away, to remove the existence of the object. Chayev atali tainlo. So as a result, you just, on the other hand, if the court had said you're obligated to pay, but had not said go pay him, the tavaku machar chayev, then you are chayev. You're still going to be subject to the 4-time and 5-time penalty. My timer, kol kama delo psikale milsa. If it hasn't yet finished, and until they actually tell the guy to pay, akati ganavu, he's still a thief and not a gazlan. So Amri ulatamei, according to your reasoning, lishnale b'shutav shetabak shalom midas chavero. Why not just let Rav Yochanan answer that we're dealing with partners, and one partner slaughtered it without the other partner's consent? Elachada mitrei utlasa nakat. The answer is that actually you're right. Rav Yochanan could have answered several different answers to this question, and these were the answers that he gave, and he happened to give one of them. And so that's where we'll stop, and we have a second ruling of Rav Yochanan. But for that, stay tuned to tomorrow's daf, and we'll wish you a Shabbat Shalom. Have a wonderful Shabbos.
Have a good day, good Shabbos.